Jamaica, one of the largest Caribbean islands, has 2.5 million people and all the typical problems and contradictions that pervade a third world country. Jamaicans can make a choice between two morning papers: The Gleaner, a 150-year-old pro-establishment newspaper, and one other daily. None of the other newspapers which have challenged The Gleaner have lasted very long, but the most recent one is the 2-year-old Jamaican Record. There is also a handful of regional papers called community papers and a variety of magazines. The other media consist of one state-owned television station, 2 national radio stations, and more recently, 2 regional radio stations.
Concerned for tonight, we're looking for fair skies out in the west, but out in the east there will be some lingering showers, particularly in the parishes of Portland and South.
My colleagues, my brothers, my sisters, my co-warriors in the building of this nation.
After a long career at The Gleaner and the Daily News, political fights and strikes for a journalist union, veteran journalist Ben Brodie started his own community paper to give expression to grassroots voices. With support from a group of committed colleagues, Boulevard News has managed to survive for 4 years now.
Section that you want, or you want to take it back and cut it first? Oh, all right. That's not a quiz thing now. We don't have pictures of the people who contribute. We had a difficulty in the naming of the people. A lot of people felt that it restricts the people by identifying a particular area. I still hear that argument, you know? And people still identify the Boulevard News with that particular area. But it has to be, a newspaper, everything has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And in the same way that the New York Times is not confined to New York, the Washington Post is not confined to Washington. The name identifies the people to establish where it was based, the Washington Boulevard. The readership of the paper primarily is a working class, unemployed, unemployable, people who are striving to get out of poverty. But you have to combine that with the other sections of the society. It's difficult for you, if you have a newspaper that caters to that aspect of life only, it will not get the kind of support that it needs to keep it alive. So you have to weigh all of this at the same time, not forgetting your original and current objective, which is to assist, to use the newspaper to assist in the development of the country.
After the last conference of the ruling People's National Party, at which Manley defended his controversial free market policies, called deregulation, the main concern of Boulevard News was about the impact on the communities and on consumers.
How do I determine what goes into the paper? Number one priority is whether or not it assists in helping people to understand what's going on around them. At the same time, because there are daily newspapers, we try not to duplicate. We come out on a fortnightly basis, so it makes no sense to carry something that the Gleaner has been carrying, the Record has been carrying, the radio stations have been carrying. People want fresh information. So the fresh information comes from either within the community or from contacts that the established media have not tapped.
To build up on their reading and their mathematics.
I noticed you didn't have any problems with reopening for this new school year. You opened right on time.
We opened on time and we have had the children every session, but we have a problem of seating. Yes, because if you notice, we are on a two-shift business and we have been doing this since the hurricane because of lack of seats.
So what are you doing about it?
We have the two shifts.
I see.
So one set comes in the morning and then one set comes in the
The
afternoon.
afternoon shift begins at what time?
At 11:45.
11:45.
And the morning shift at
And it
7:30.
goes on till
quarter to 4, no.
Quarter to 4.
Yes.
Boulevard News finds a variety of stories in communities like Matherley, highlighting the many acute social problems caused by chronic balance of payments difficulties. Despite the pervasive poverty, the Jamaican population is very aware and interested in what's happening around them. Every issue is discussed at length in bars, on street corners, and on radio talk shows.
Yeah. Why you talk to people? Yeah.
There's one news agency that we subscribe to. We are probably the most ardent fans of this agency, and it's IPS, Interpress Service. They have been very good to us. They have encouraged us. They give us information at concessionary rates. And I should tell you that I get resistance for using international news in a community newspaper. Yeah, people believe that because you are a community newspaper, your scope should be confined to community activity. I don't believe in that.
Why? What's your perception?
The community has to be exposed to exactly what is happening, not only in the community, but in the wider nation and in the international community. Africa is a priority for Jamaican people. And IPS provides information about what's happening in all different states in Africa, which you don't get in the mainstream media. You get information about Africa when there's a coup, or when there is some kind of upheaval or famine or something like that. But in terms of the whole process of development, because what is happening in those countries is what is happening in Jamaica. So we can easily get a story from Nigeria, which the man in the community in Marvelly can understand, because that is the same problem that he's having. up around this round the picture.
Avenue, Highgate, Friday, October 26th. Champion Sound, admission $15, refreshments on sale.
An important part of Ben's activities at Boulevard News is keeping his finger on the pulse of the community. Bars like this are both a meeting place and an information point for the newspaper editor.
A lot of the work of the newspaper is done outside of the people, where people come to you with their problems, difficulties, and you have to deal with them. You don't say, well, this is a great story. This man has a problem with his landlord, so you blow it up in the newspaper. You try to advise him or to assist him in solving his problem. It's an all-encompassing thing. It's not just a job. It's a part of your life.
Jamaica, the one and only Michael Norman Joshua Manley.
For land reform, for opportunities for farmers, proud of the great revolutions in education that we created in the 1950s and again in the 1970s that have transformed the landscape of opportunity for all the people of Jamaica. How much sugar do we produce? How much bauxite do we mine? How much electricity can we generate? How many dressmakers do we have? How many shoes can we produce? And therefore, since production based on initiative is what we are working to achieve, the first thing that we have said is we have to clean out the tax system so that the taxman...
Jamaica's national media. They are all here to cover Manley's address to a somber crowd at the People's National Party conference. Young Jamaican journalists are usually trained for the traditional approaches to journalism, such as the reporting of speeches by politicians. But an increasing number of journalists, such as Ben Brodie, are looking for new approaches to practicing their craft.
All the Caribbean islands to integrate their economies, to become stronger in production, and that means we have to have a common tax system. That will start in January.
Okay. So politics and politicians, that may be one of the things that changes how we look at something. All right?
Suzanne Francis-Hinds is a journalist, a lecturer, and a radio program maker at one of the regional stations.
So one of the things, you remember that we talked about this, that one of the things that perhaps people have to do is look at the possibility of localizing news. You're going to take a bit of a different view. As a reporter, you're still going to seek for objectivity, but you're still going to come at it with a different set of concepts and a different set of precepts because of your own upbringing, of where you are from, of what you have had to deal with in your life. Our journalists, like journalists everywhere, learn certain news values, certain values to do with how you judge that a story is newsworthy. I studied in Cardiff, you know. Many of our journalists here have studied abroad. Some have more recently, a lot of them have come through the Caribbean Institute of Mass Communications. So we learn certain things that journalists everywhere learn, okay? But I think that we value stories to do with humanity. We value stories to do with people, which is why you'll, for instance, see a story about a taxi driver who gave back a woman a bag with $10,000 in it, because in a situation of economic hardship, it would be very tempting for that taxi driver to just disappear with that bag. And I think for that sort of reason, we feel that he's an outstanding person, and that sort of story will always hit high up, if not the front page of our papers. In terms of situations to international stories, I would say that when a big international story breaks the first day, yes, it'll be on our front page as well. If it is something that we think might have impact on us, whether specifically on us or on the world in which we live, it's not going to stay on the front page. Interpress is a third world news agency and is basically one of the two news agencies that have been operating in Jamaica consistently over a number of years. A women's feature service, which was a specialized service set up under the Interpress service umbrella. And they asked me if I would come on full time to coordinate their Caribbean service. You have a clear notion of what it is that he's talking about, because I wasn't 100% clear on what it is that he was dealing with. Sometimes I do various other things, projects of one sort or another, as long as they don't conflict in any way with what I do in terms of the women's feature service. Because it's important. I think what I'm doing there is a matter of trying to share information about the region in which I live and of which I'm a part, with other people who have some similar experiences right around the world, and to an extent, getting that information into the North, you know, in ways in which it does not normally appear, because most of the time when people from Europe, from America, see images of the Caribbean, images of Jamaica, what they're seeing is a situation where something has happened. You know, there's a coup in Trinidad, or there's an election fraud talked about in Guyana, or there's violence in Jamaica or something. And a journalist will come down here and do a story and jump back on the plane and go about their business. And that's when I'm saying that, you know, sometimes it's the things that jump off the paper that people are interested in, where it comes to seeing images of a place.
That's the first problem. The second problem is that construction often takes place without adequate concern for runoff. A lot of hotels will look out at a beautiful area and say, this is a great place to build a hotel. This is really a beautiful coral reef area, and this is where we should build. They'll proceed with their building, they bring in their heavy equipment, and after they start digging and there's runoff, siltation increases dramatically.
I hope you know that, man. I have to give you some bucks. Some bucks, man.
I was talking to an environmental guy up the coast, okay? And what he's dealing with is that one of the problems that the reef having, right, is that people are overfishing it. I'm taking too much fish. I'm taking too small fish,
size of the
right?
fish.
And as a consequence, as time goes on, a number of fish that are available, right, will be less. You know, I don't know how you find it. Do you find that there are less and less fish every year?
Yes, but it's not because of that alone.
Yeah.
The first wrong move is that there are pits now that they're putting in the ocean. Because I could remember a few years ago they put 1,000 feet of sewage pipe down in Ocho. And it was one of the loveliest ground we had for mullets, you know, snappers and so on. It was a breeding area. Now it's empty.
To me, there is an issue as to whether people see things in that way, whether people are looking to a future or whether they're just dealing with day-to-day survival. And I think we need to get those stories to try and find out how they see it, whether they see the environment as an issue that is of some importance to them or whether they see it as something that is just, you know, these guys are just coming and talking about, this is just the latest story. You're free to an extent. You're free to write anything you want, okay? There are limitations on journalists in terms of what a publisher will carry from a local point of view. And clearly, you know, if there's something that's really going to make a big problem, then it may be tempered. I don't think things get squashed for that reason, not in the local media anyway. In terms of operating as in an international context, I think perhaps sometimes we consider the impact things will have in terms of how we say things, not so much what we say. I think if there is a story to be written, it will be written. But perhaps we think a little as to how we write it and who we are writing it for. I don't think it's a matter of suppressing a story. I think it is, as I said, a matter of sometimes looking at the implications and maybe using a word rather than another word, not being sensationalistic if it is not necessary. It is also a matter of providing context, and I think that is also very important.
The Week in Review, an analysis of the issues surrounding the week's top stories.
Good morning. Welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Suzanne Francis-Hinds, and with me on the program this morning are Winnie Risden-Hunter, communications consultant, and John Jackson, chartered accountant and publisher of Investor's Choice magazine.
To me, it would be so nice to do a magazine that, for instance, does a story on women in the sugar fields, because in here and in many other countries of the world, women work in the fields. And that says, you know, here's a story with an illustration. And then on this side of the page, you know, there's a box that says, here in Jamaica, you know, there have recently been efforts to make the situation in the cane fields for women better. You know, this is what has happened here. 3-4 paragraphs that set it off. And then next is the story. And I'd like to do a magazine that does mainly that. Because I think that what happens internationally is important. It is important. It impacts on us. We live in a very small world. You know, sometimes when we drive from end to end across the mountains and it takes a long time, it seems like we live in a big place. And Jamaicans, for all, when we look at our island on the map, it's very small. But at the same time, our little island is a part of a bigger world. And we have to interpret the world for ourselves in much the same way as in Europe or in America. There is an interpretation of the world that makes us a very small part of it. And we have to look at the world through our own sort of spectacles and get an impression of it and interpret it for ourselves.
The love of my life.
You have too much love.
Susan! No, no!
I didn't make it up. I truly made that one.
Iraq? Country.
What? So, the Kuwait?
Is your name? Which country? Yeah, they
Oh, Irate.
Irate.
I heard that one. I heard that one.